Hello, folks, and welcome to the Potato Goose Podcast, where today we're going to be discussing The Office, a popular American TV show based on a group of people who, unsurprisingly, work in an office accompanied by the embodiment of the fun boss stereotypes, Michael Scott, who makes their daily experiences diverse and sometimes hellish. In this particular episode, we're going to be discussing the episode 2 of the first season called Diversity Day, which is based on racism and how Michael Scott can sometimes make inappropriate and offensive comments in the workplace.
Yeah, he can be a little bit offensive, just a bit. So, one of the first topics, obviously, that we encounter in the episode is racism. But beforehand, we're going to make a quick analysis of the character and personality of Michael Scott, our beloved central character of the show, loved by many and hated by even more people. Yeah. So, the thing about this character is that even though we almost never agree with what whatever he says, which you can't avoid loving him. It's just right. He's so funny in a way that he doesn't realize it's another level of comedy. Like exactly. He tries to be funny. We know that what he's really saying isn't funny at all, but that makes us laugh. What do you think?
Exactly. So it's like that kind of feeling of secondhand embarrassment that we get from Michael Scott that really cracks us up all the time. Because in his perspective, like from his perspective, his jokes are supposed to be funny in another way. But we, however, feel like the embarrassment of all the other people hearing those jokes, experiencing them, and that's what actually cracks us up. So in that way, we may love him, but in the workplace, they might find him a tad annoying and irritating at
times.
Yeah,
we wouldn't want him to be our boss.
Of course not.
And I think that's obviously the reason why so many people struggle and don't like the show at all, because they just can't harness this kind of secondhand embarrassment. They just can't. It's so. Exactly. I mean, I understand it, but it's worth the pain.
It's a very specific type of humor that not all people can.
Maybe not many people feel appealed by this kind of humor. Well, actually, it's not secondhand embarrassment that makes people maybe not like the show, because I think that one of the reasons why they don't like it either is that maybe they may feel offended by the comments that he makes, especially at the beginning of the show, at the first seasons. What do you think about it?
Well, I don't know. Like me personally, I don't usually get offended by these kind of jokes and comments. I personally find them pretty funny because I think that they don't actually represent the reality and the opinions of certain characters. But in this case, I can totally understand how some people might feel appalled by these sort of comments and how they may feel offended.
Yeah, but still, I think that the purpose of the show goes a bit beyond that. That they are trying that people shouldn't be offended by that. They can feel offended, but they shouldn't be offended by these comments because it's the people who write the scripts that are trying to make the character of Michael Scott ridiculous, trying to ridiculize the character and their comments, so that because we're not really laughing at the jokes themselves, which maybe that's the case, but oftentimes we just laugh at him and what he does. So that's what kind of the purpose of the show, to make us feel like that is not the correct thing to do.
Exactly. So we can kind of rectify the situation and show us like how we shouldn't act, and that these jokes, like, they may not be funny, but we can just laugh at the characters and move on. See, I don't think it's that deep that we need to consider the offensiveness of these jokes. I think they're just jokes and they don't mean anything, and that we should just like learn from the show and did not make the same comments as Michael Scott does.
Yeah, because I mean, we left at the fact that he's completely oblivious to the connotation of the comments he makes. Like he's in complete delusion. That's something important in the show, that Michael Scott thinks of himself as someone really, really funny, and he tries really, really hard to be liked by everybody. I think that's also because of his insecurities that he always tries to hide, but end up having the opposite effect. It backfires on him because he doesn't really. Everybody notices that he's trying so hard to hide them, and that makes it even worse.
Exactly. So it kind of underlines his ego and his narcissism, so as to say, that he simply cannot see that his jokes are not actually perceived as funny by everyone else, and he just thinks of himself as the greatest boss in the universe.
Exactly. However, obviously, we see all the co-workers in the office having quite different opinions on him. We see wide variety of reactions. For example, in the Diversity Day, actually, we see Kelly slapping him, but there are other reactions, like, well, actually, one character that is completely oblivious to everything that's going on is Creed, and he doesn't really care about anything. He doesn't understand anything that's going on. But for example, Jim, obviously he does not agree, and he doesn't like the comments Michael does. But he's got more of a passive attitude towards that. He just assumes that he can't do anything about it, and he just relies on looking at the camera and saying, "You're not the only one who's feeling offended. Like, you're not the only one who's feeling really, really, really embarrassed by this." So what do you think of those different perspectives within the same office?
Right, so like coming back to what I said earlier, as how we should learn from Michael's mistakes and how he shows us how we shouldn't act, I think that Jim sort of embodies our thoughts, and he sort of represents the way that we should be acting around people who sometimes can act offensive to us, that we should simply ignore them instead of responding to their comments, and we should just move on and obviously just not give them any attention.
Yeah, exactly. I think Jim is kind of one of the only characters. Well, actually, Jim and Pam are the characters that we can relate to most, because they're the only ones who seem to have common sense, because all the others have many quirks, and they have many flaws and things that we just can't relate to because they're so weird. But they are the ones who really help us be understood within the show.
Right, so Jim sort of acts as the rational person in these kind of crazy situations, which Michael Scott creates. Right, so he kind of helps us, kind of represents our thoughts, right, and like what we think about this insane situation.
Yeah, exactly. We've got like two different roles within the show. Jim is the one we can relate to, the one we feel like the logical one, but the one that's carrying, in my opinion, the show in the comedy is Michael Scott, which is we have this contrasting roles within the show that help the show carry on.
I mean, don't you think that every show needs to have like a sort of diversity in the personalities of the characters, because otherwise it'd be very boring and repetitive.
Yeah.
Like everybody had the same personality. Like imagine if everybody were the same as Michael Scott, which we're gonna analyze in a bit with the Top Packer and Michael Scott. They're very similar, and when they're together, it's just the same kind of reactions over and over again. So it kind of gets really boring after a certain amount of time.
I have to disagree a bit, because it seems that they're quite similar, but they're not similar at all. Top Packer, is very different to Michael, because Michael is just trying to be like him, but he's not really like him at all. They do have the same stereotypes at the back of their heads, but their attitudes towards other people are very different. Top Packer seems very confident. He's a douche. I mean, that's the truth. He's a douche. But Michael he's at least he tries to make people feel better, even though he doesn't make it. He doesn't manage to do it. But he at least tries. The Top Pocket doesn't care. I mean, I think he's a character that's been made to be hated.
Right. I mean, obviously, I agree with you that they are different in these ways, but basically, what I was trying to say that they do have a similar sense of humor, and but as you said, the distinctive characteristic between the two characters might be that Michael Scott actually has good intentions towards his coworkers, and he obviously tries to make the workplace a little bit more of he tries to create a fun ambience in a sort of this boring and mundane environment, and that can be seen as really noble.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's another factor that helps us, that makes us laugh quite a lot, because we see the irony in Michael Scott trying so hard to make the office a funny environment and comfortable to everyone, and at the same time making it so awkward and not that funny for many people. And I think, well, actually, there might be somebody that disagrees, and that's Dwight, who we see throughout the show hailing Michael and being, in many occasions, the only one who is backing him up with his comments or anything he does.
I find it kind of funny how he looks up to Michael when literally nobody else in the office does the same thing, because like we can see all the characters sort of being annoyed by Michael's attitude towards things. Right? However, Dwight is constantly supporting him. He's a bit of a kiss ass, you could say, because he is trying to get promoted.
Yes, exactly. That's what I wanted to say. That I think it's kind of blend of two different factors. That he's been educated, he's very disciplined, so he knows that he's the boss. That Michael is the boss. That he's got more power than him, and that he's got to respect and obey him in everything he does. And I think that the fact that he wants to get promoted, his long-term goal is to become the manager of the office, and he always seeks more power, and that's why I think, as you said, he's kind of a kiss ass and tries always to make Michael feel better about everything he does, while all the other workers in the office just have normal reactions, which are being creeped out and offended by some of his comments.
Alright, so that's another character which we can laugh at for being ridiculous in some aspects and for sort of causing us secondhand embarrassment, which is obviously a very used type of humor in this show. Right, and another interesting relationship that we can see throughout the show is obviously Michael's and Toby's, because it may seem obvious that he hates Toby.
Such a good couple.
Right, and a possible hypothesis for this hate relationship is that, as Toby works in human resources, he's constantly trying to interrupt Michael and prevent him from making his at times sexist, homophobic, and racist jokes. Because he's obviously, as he works in HR, he's trying to constantly prevent these kind of offensive jokes from taking place.
Yeah, he wants him to make at least politically correct jokes, which is nothing like Michael Scott's type. Nothing at all. So that's why, we think that's the reason why he just hates Toby to the bone. He just can't stand the guy. And we also, we see Toby as a person that doesn't have a lot of life. He's not very proactive, and we kind of empathize with him at the same time. But we also like I for one like Michael Scott. So at times you can't help but hate Toby a little bit and jump aboard the Toby hate train with Michael Scott because of your love towards the character.
Right, it's such a recurring joke throughout the entirety of the show, that Michael hates Toby, that we kind of can get aboard with him and hate Toby together, which is obviously a bit unfair towards Toby because obviously his just introduced job, and maybe he doesn't actually deserve all the hate from Michael.
Exactly. Deep down, we all know he's just trying to do his job and he's not doing anything bad. But just for the sake of comedy, we like to sometimes hate him a little bit.
Right, and isn't that like the most people who work in that office are just trying to get their job done, and well, Michael can be like a sort of constant
Disruption.
Exactly. So we can kind of like people who have worked in an office before can kind of relate to that. That Michael can be constantly annoying, interrupting, and preventing you from actually doing your job. Which is kind of funny because he's the manager. He's supposed to be the person controlling you.
He's the one supposed to make sure everyone's working.
Exactly.
And yet he's the one that's making everyone not work. I mean, the most common thing we see is that almost every day, in every episode, he calls a conference room meeting, which just interrupts everyone's work, just for some kind of for some reason that nobody cares about, and he just likes to do these things.
Right, exactly, and I find it interesting, like how people such as us who have never worked in an office before obviously can find it somehow funny, but others can find it very annoying, and they think that it would be pretty much impossible to work in that kind of environment, which is another reason, an understandable reason, why some people dislike this show.
Alright, that'll be all for today, and thank you for listening for the Potato Goose podcast. We'll see you in the next one.
Take care.